The gun was already loaded. Zuri knew this because she could hear the click from where she was hiding, pressed flat against the cold stone wall behind a thick velvet curtain, barely breathing, her heart beating so loud she was terrified someone would hear it. She had come to this mansion to clean floors. Now she was crouched in the dark, holding information that could get her killed. Through the gap in the curtain, she could see them. 3 Russian guards in gray uniforms standing around a mahogany table. Big men. Serious men. The kind of man who didn't smile and didn't joke. One of them was tracing his finger across a map spread open on the table. Another was whispering into a phone. The third stood at the door, arms crossed, watching. Zuri didn't speak Russian, but she spoke numbers. And she had heard one number repeated 3 times in the last 2 minutes. 40 million. And she had heard one name. A name she recognized immediately because she had heard it whispered in fear by every person who worked in this city's underworld. Dmitri. The man her boss, the man everyone in this building answered to, trusted completely. Her cleaning cart was 6 feet away, abandoned in the middle of the hallway. Any guard who walked past would see it and know someone was nearby. She had to move. But if she moved, they would hear her. And if they heard her, the curtain shifted. Zuri stopped breathing entirely. A hand appeared at the edge of the curtain. Large. Ringed. Reaching toward the fabric with slow, deliberate movement. And just as the curtain began to pull back, a door slammed somewhere down the hall. The hand withdrew. The guards turned. Rapid Russian she couldn't understand flew across the room. Zuri ran. Before we go back to the beginning of this story, drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss what happens next. 3 weeks earlier, Zuri had no idea any of this existed. She was 23 years old, Ghanaian British, with deep dark brown skin and natural hair she kept in 2 big puffs on either side of her head. She was not tall, barely 5'4", but she carried herself like someone who had survived things which she had. She had quick, sharp eyes that noticed everything and a mind that processed information faster than most people spoke it. She had come to Moscow 6 months ago on a cleaning contract arranged through an agency. It was good money, more than she had made in 2 years back in London, and she had a younger brother's school fees to cover and a mother's medical bills that didn't care about the exchange rate. So she cleaned. She cleaned offices. She cleaned restaurants. She cleaned private homes for men who wore watches worth more than her entire neighborhood. She kept her head down, did her work, said please and thank you in her careful broken Russian, and went home to the small flat she shared with 2 other women from the agency. She was invisible. And in this city, being invisible was safe. The Volkov estate contract came in her 4th month. Her supervisor had looked at her strangely when she handed it to her. You understand this is private work, the woman said. These people are very particular. You do not look at things. You do not touch things you are not supposed to touch. You come in, you clean, you leave. You understand. Zuri had said yes. She understood. She had been understanding things like that her whole life. The estate was enormous, a white stone mansion set behind black iron gates on the edge of the city, with security cameras at every corner and men with earpieces at every door. The first time she arrived, she was searched twice, her bag emptied and repacked, her cleaning products tested. She stood through all of it patiently, face neutral, eyes forward. Inside the mansion, the floors were Italian marble. The ceilings were painted. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. And everywhere, every room, every hallway, every staircase, there were men. Guards, assistants, advisors. All of them move with purpose. All of them speak in low voices. Zuri cleaned and did not look. She met her boss on the 3rd visit. His name was Alexei Volkov. He was 51 years old, Russian, with silver gray hair cut short and eyes the color of a winter sky. Pale blue, cold but not empty. He was not physically large, but he commanded every room. He entered the way that certain people do, not through noise but through gravity. Everyone near him adjusted their posture. Everyone near him chose their words carefully. He was the most powerful criminal figure in Moscow. Zuri knew this because it was impossible to work inside his home and not know it, regardless of how carefully you kept your eyes down. He noticed her on her third visit in a way that most employers never notice cleaners, not romantically, not predatorily, but observationally. The way a chess player notices a new piece on the board. "You work quickly," he said in accented English, appearing in the doorway of the library she was dusting. Zuri had looked up, startled. "Thank you, sir." "How long have you been in Moscow?" "For months, sir." He had looked at her for a moment longer, that pale blue gaze doing something that felt like measuring, and then nodded and walked away. The next week she was assigned to his estate full-time. She was given a small room in the staff quarters and a schedule that covered 6 days a week. More money, more security checks, and more exposure to the world operating inside those marble walls. This was where she began to understand what she had walked into. The man called Dmitry arrived in the second week of her full-time assignment. His full name was Dmitry Yusov. He was Alexei's head of security, had been for 11 years, according to the kitchen staff who talked more than anyone else in that building. He was 45, thick-necked, with a broad face and small careful eyes and a voice like gravel being poured slowly. He smiled often, but the smile never reached those eyes. Everyone treated him with respect. Almost everyone. The housekeeper, a Georgian woman named Nana who had worked in the estate for 8 years, was the only person Zuri ever saw look at Dmitry with something other than deference. It was just a look, a flicker, barely a second, but Zuri caught it on her first meeting with him and filed it away. Nana noticed Zuri noticing. That evening, in the kitchen while they ate dinner with the other staff, Nana leaned close to Zuri and said very quietly in English, which she spoke better than she let on, "You have good eyes." Zuri had looked at her. "Keep them open," Nana said. "And keep your mouth closed." Then she went back to her food like nothing had happened. Zuri had lain awake that night in her small staff room staring at the ceiling, telling herself it was nothing. People in powerful houses said cryptic things. It meant nothing. She almost convinced herself. The first thing she actually saw was small. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days after Dmitry arrived. Zuri was cleaning the long corridor outside the East Wing offices, running her mop in smooth, careful strokes, earphones in but nothing playing, which was her habit because earphones made people speak more freely around you. 2 of Dmitry's Russian guards walked past. They were speaking quietly and quickly, the kind of conversation that has a shape even when you don't understand the words. The shape of this one was urgent, secret, satisfied. She caught nothing she understood except one word. Stelka. She didn't know what it meant, but she repeated it to herself all the way back to her room and typed it into her phone that night. Deal. She stared at the translation for a long time. Then she told herself she was being paranoid and went to sleep. The second thing she saw was not small at all. It was a Friday. Alexei was out, a rare occurrence, a dinner meeting across the city that kept him away until late. The estate felt different when he was gone. Looser. Like a body whose spine had momentarily left. Zuri was working the Upper East Wing later than usual, finishing a deep clean of the guest rooms. She was coming back down the service staircase, a narrow stone passage used only by staff, when she heard voices below her. She slowed without deciding to. 3 voices. Russian. She recognized 2 of them as guards she had seen with Dmitry. The third voice she didn't recognize, slightly accented in a different way, rougher at the edges. She didn't understand the words, but she heard the number. Sorok Millionov. She had learned enough Russian to know Millionov meant million. She did not know Sorok, but it repeated twice more, and she memorized the sound of it precisely. 40 million. She confirmed it that night on her phone. And then she heard the name. Not Alexei. Not any name she had heard in this house before. A name that sounded like a reference, a third party. Someone outside the walls. Someone the guards were speaking about with a tone that was not respectful, but was something else. Anticipatory. Hungry. She climbed back up the stairs silently and did not breathe properly until she was in her room. The next morning she made a decision she knew was dangerous. She was going to find out what was happening. Not because it was her business. Not because she was brave in the reckless way people describe in stories. But because Nana's words were still in her head, keep your eyes open. And because the feeling in her gut when she heard that conversation was the same feeling she had learned to trust in 23 years of surviving things. The feeling that said, something is very wrong here, and wrong things that go unaddressed have a way of landing on whoever is nearest. And she was very near. She began paying different attention. Not obvious attention. She was too careful for that. But the kind that accumulates quietly, like water filling a container drop by drop. She noticed which rooms Dimitri's guards visited when Alexei was elsewhere. She noticed when voices dropped as she approached and rose again as she passed. She noticed which phones came out at which hours and which conversations happened near windows, away from the hallway cameras. And then came the day she was cleaning the south corridor and heard movement behind the velvet curtain of the west alcove and decided, without fully deciding, to step behind it. And heard everything. Which is where our story began. Zuri ran down the service corridor, her sneakers silent on the stone floor, her cleaning cart abandoned, her heart slamming. She didn't know where she was going, only away. Only somewhere with a wall at her back and time to think. She found it in the laundry room. Small, white, loud with the sound of machines. She locked the door behind her and pressed her back against it and breathed. 40 million. Dimitri. A deal. Being made without Alexei knowing. She was certain of that last part now. The way the guards had spoken, the timing, the secrecy, the fact that they only met like this when Alexei was occupied. It was not a conversation his most trusted man was having on his behalf. It was a conversation being had behind his back, which meant one of two things. Dimitri was selling something that wasn't his to sell. Or Dimitri was selling someone. Zuri pressed her hands flat against the laundry room door and stared at the ceiling and thought about her brother's school fees and her mother's medical bills and the two women she shared a flat with who didn't know where she worked and the small room upstairs with her passport in the drawer. Then she thought about Alexei Volkov's pale blue eyes. And she made the second decision of the day that she knew was dangerous. She was going to tell him. Zuri stood outside Alexei Volkov's office door for 4 full minutes. She counted them. Not because she was being dramatic, but because her legs genuinely would not move. Her hand was raised to knock, and her knuckles were an inch from the wood, and her entire body was having a conversation with her brain about whether this was the single most foolish thing she had ever done. The brain was losing. She knocked. 3 seconds of silence. Then a voice, low, measured, accented. Come. She pushed the door open. Alexei was behind his desk, reading something in a manila folder, a glass of water beside him. He didn't look up immediately. He was the kind of man who finished what he was doing before he acknowledged you, not out of rudeness, but out of principle. Everything on its own time. Everything in its proper order. Then he looked up. His pale blue eyes moved over her face with that familiar measuring quality, taking in her expression, her posture, the fact that she was holding her own hands together to stop them shaking. You are not scheduled for this floor today, he said. No, sir, Zuri said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. I need to tell you something. And I need you to know that I understand if you don't believe me. But I heard something I think you need to hear, and I couldn't tell you. Alexei closed the manila folder slowly. He leaned back in his chair and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Sit down, he said. She told him everything. Not quickly, she made herself slow down and be precise. The service staircase. The 3 voices. The number is 40 million. The name she had heard repeated. The curtained alcove and what she had overheard before the door slammed and she ran. She told him about the translation of Stelka on her phone. She told him about the pattern she had noticed over 2 weeks, which rooms, which hours, which conversations near windows. She told him about Nana's warning during her first week. Alexei listened to all of it without interrupting once. His face showed nothing. His eyes stayed on her face the entire time, which was slightly unnerving, not threatening, just complete and total attention. When she finished, there was a silence that lasted long enough for Zuri to start wondering if she had made a catastrophic mistake. Then Alexei said, "The name you heard. Say it again." She said it. Something moved across his face. Fast, like a shadow crossing a window. Gone before she could name it. You are certain, he said. Not a question. I heard it 4 times, Zuri said. I memorized it. Another silence. He looked at his desk without seeing it. His right hand, resting on the folder, was completely still, the deliberate stillness of a man who had trained himself not to show reaction. You could have said nothing, he said finally. You could have kept your head down and your mouth closed and gone on doing your work. Yes, Zuri said. Why didn't you? She thought about the honest answer. Because I was in the building. And whatever this is, when it goes wrong, I don't want to be the person standing nearby who didn't say anything. He looked at her for a long moment. You're smarter than your job description, he said. It wasn't a compliment, exactly. It was an observation, the same way he'd said you work quickly the first time, like he was updating a file in his head. Thank you for telling me, he said. Go back to your work. Say nothing to anyone. Not Nana. Not the kitchen staff. No one. Zuri stood. And Dimitri? I will handle Dimitri. She nodded and walked to the door. Her hand was on the handle when he spoke again. Miss, he paused. I don't know your name. Zuri, she said. Zuri. He said it carefully, like he was filing it correctly. Do not go anywhere alone in this building for the next few days. Stay in visible areas. Understood? The instruction landed cold and clear in her chest. Understood, she said. She went back to work. This was the hardest part, returning to the normal rhythm of mops and polish and quiet hallways while her mind ran at a completely different speed underneath. She cleaned the East Wing bathroom tiles with the same careful strokes she always used. She restocked the linen closet. She ate dinner in the kitchen with the other staff and laughed at something one of the cooks said and drank her tea and went to her room. Normal. Ordinary. Invisible. But that night she lay in her small bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to the sounds of the house around her. Footsteps in corridors, a door closing somewhere above, the distant sound of voices, and she thought about what Alexei had said. Do not go anywhere alone. He had said it the way someone says a thing they have already calculated. Not as reassurance. As an instruction based on risk assessment. Which meant he believed her. Which meant the risk was real. She pulled her blanket up and told herself to sleep, and did not sleep for a very long time. The next 2 days were quiet in the way that certain silences are loud. Dimitri was still in the building. She saw him twice in the main corridor, moving with his usual broad-shouldered confidence, nodding to staff, speaking on his phone. Nothing different about his surface. Nothing that would tell anyone watching that anything had changed. But things had changed. Zuri could feel it in small ways that required the kind of attention she had been paying for weeks now. 2 of Alexei's personal guards, men she had never seen stationed there before, were now positioned at the end of the corridor near Dimitri's quarters. A new camera had appeared above the East Wing staircase. And Alexei himself had canceled 2 external meetings. She knew this because the kitchen prepared meals for guests who never arrived. He was pulling inward, tightening something. Nana noticed Zuri noticing again. On the second evening, passing her in the linen corridor, Nana pressed something small and cold into Zuri's hand without slowing down or looking at her. Zuri kept walking. When she reached her room, she opened her palm. A key. Old, small brass. Nothing written on it. She stared at it for a long time. On the 3rd day, everything accelerated. It started in the morning, before breakfast, before the house had fully woken up. Zuri was in the East Wing corridor when she heard raised voices from behind the closed door of Alexei's private study. She couldn't make out words. The doors in this house were thick, but she could make out the tone. Alexei's voice, controlled, cold, deliberate. Dimitri's voice. She recognized it even through the door, and what she heard in it was not the confident rumble she was used to. What she heard was defensive. Pressure. The voices lasted 4 minutes. Then silence. Then the sound of a single door, not the main study door but the side door, the one that led directly to the back staircase, opening and closing. Zuri moved before she decided to. She went to the window at the end of the corridor and looked down into the rear courtyard below. Dimitri was walking fast across the courtyard toward the side gate. He had his phone to his ear. He was not looking back at the building. He was not dressed for a meeting. He was not carrying anything. He was leaving. Zuri's stomach dropped. She turned and walked quickly, not running, never running. Running attracted attention, toward the main staircase. She needed to think. She needed to understand what she had just seen. If Alexei had confronted Dmitri, and Dmitri was now. She stopped. At the bottom of the main staircase, blocking the corridor that led to the staff quarters, stood one of Dmitri's guards. Not Alexei's men. Dmitri's. She knew the difference now. She had learned it over weeks. This man had been one of Dmitri's personal details since his arrival. He was looking directly at her. He had not been standing there this morning. Zuri kept her face completely still. She turned as if she had forgotten something, easy, casual, and went back up the stairs the way she came.
Her heart was going very fast.
She ducked into the linen room and pressed the door shut behind her and stood in the narrow white space between the shelves and thought very quickly. Dmitri was gone. But his men were still in the building, which meant Alexei had confronted Dmitri and Dmitri had left, but he had not taken his guards with him. They were still here. Why would a man who had just been caught and was running leave his guards behind? Unless they weren't waiting for him to come back. Unless they had a different instruction. The brass key in her pocket felt suddenly very heavy. She pulled it out and looked at it.
Small. Old.
No marking. She thought about Nana, where Nana's room was, where Nana moved in this building, which doors Nana had access to that other staff didn't. She thought about Alexei saying, "Do not go anywhere alone." She thought about Dmitri's guard at the bottom of the stairs looking directly at her. She made the decision fast because fast was the only option available. She was going to find Nana.
Right now.
Before anything else happened. She cracked the linen room door open and looked both ways down the corridor.
Clear.
She slipped out and moved fast along the wall toward the back passage, the one the kitchen staff used, the one without cameras, the one she had memorized in her first week because she always memorized exit routes. Old habit. Growing up the way she had, you learned where the doors were. She was 10 steps from the passage entrance when the lights in the corridor went out. Not a flicker. Not a gradual dimming. All at once. Complete darkness. And from somewhere below, deep in the belly of the house, a sound she had never heard before in this building. An alarm.
Low.
Urgent. The kind that doesn't ask questions. Zuri pressed herself flat against the wall in the total darkness and did not make a sound. And then she heard footsteps. Coming up the back staircase.
Fast.
Multiple sets. Coming toward her. The footsteps stopped. Zuri pressed herself so flat against the wall she could feel every cold stone through her uniform. The darkness was total. The alarm had cut out 3 seconds ago, which was somehow worse than when it was sounding. Silence after an alarm meant someone had made a decision. She counted the footsteps. 4 sets. Maybe 5. Heavy. Deliberate. Not running. Which meant they weren't panicking. Which meant they knew exactly where they were going. She heard a door open. The back staircase door, 10 feet to her left. Light spilled into the corridor. Narrow. Torchlight. The beam swept left. Then right. Zuri had already moved. In the 3 seconds between the alarm cutting out and the door opening, she had pressed herself into the shallow alcove beside the linen room, barely 12 inches deep, barely enough, and pulled her knees in and made herself as small as 23 years of surviving things had taught her to be. The torchlight swept past her. Footsteps moved down the corridor away from her.
4 sets.
Talking low in Russian. She waited until they were completely gone. Then she counted to 10. Then she moved. She found Nana in the kitchen. Not cooking. Not eating. Sitting at the long wooden kitchen table in the dark with her hands folded in front of her and her eyes on the door, like she had been waiting. Like she had known someone was coming. Zuri slipped through the kitchen door, and Nana looked at her, and something in the old woman's face relaxed by 1 degree. "Sit," Nana said quietly. "There's no time. Sit." Firmer. Zuri sat. Nana looked at her hands for a moment. Then she said, "Dmitri is gone. His men have orders. You understand what that means."
"They're not leaving," Zuri said. "No."
Nana's voice was flat and certain. "They are not leaving. Dmitri made a deal, not with outside people. with inside people. 3 of Alexei's own senior men. People who have been here for years. She paused. The 40 million was not payment for information. It was payment for access. They were going to let people into this building tonight. People who were going to make sure Alexei did not wake up tomorrow morning. The kitchen was very quiet. Zuri absorbed this. Does Alexei know? He knows about Dmitri. He does not know about the 3 inside men. Nana looked at her steadily. I only found out 1 hour ago. I was coming to find you. Why me? Nana was quiet for a moment. Because you are the only person in this building right now that I am certain about. Zuri felt the weight of that settle onto her shoulders. She looked at the brass key still in her hand. What is this open? The East Basement Communications Room, Nana said. Old system. Not connected to the main building network. Whatever they have done to the power and the cameras, that room still works. It has its own line. To who? To people who will come, Nana said simply. People who answer to Alexei only. Not to Dmitri. Not to the 3 inside men. Only to him. Zuri looked at the key. Then at Nana. Where is Alexei right now? His private study. Top floor. He has 2 men with him, his personal guards, the ones he trusts. But the inside men know this. They will move soon. She paused. Which is why we have to move first. Getting to the east basement was not simple. The building had 3 stairwells. The main staircase was out. Dmitri's remaining guards were positioned there. The back staircase she had just come from was compromised. That left the service elevator, old, slow, mechanical, that ran from the kitchen level down to the basement storage. Nana knew the building the way you know something after 8 years. Not just its rooms, but its rhythms, its sounds, its blind spots. She led Zuri through the kitchen storage room, through a connecting passage that smelled of old wood and cleaning fluid, to a narrow door that Zuri had passed 100 times without ever opening. Behind it, the service elevator. A metal cage barely large enough for 2 people and a laundry cart. They got in. Nana pulled the cage door shut by hand. It made a sound. Both of them froze. Footsteps in the passage they had just left. Coming fast. Nana hit the button. The elevator descended with the painful slowness of old machinery. Through the metal cage they could see the passage door above them opening, torchlight, a figure looking down the shaft. The basement swallowed them. The communications room was exactly where Nana said it would be, behind the boiler room, behind a locked door that the brass key opened on the second attempt because Zuri's hands were not entirely steady. Inside, a small room with concrete walls. A desk. A radio transmitter that looked like it belonged to a different decade. A single overhead bulb that flickered on when Nana hit the switch. This room had its own generator feed, just as she had said. And a telephone. Old. Black. With a direct line that bypassed the main building exchange. Nana picked up the receiver and listened. Then she handed it to Zuri. Dial tone. It works. Who do I call? Nana gave her a number from memory. 7 digits. Say exactly this. Volkov read. East basement. Tonight. Nothing else. They will understand. Zuri dialed. Her finger moved around the rotary disc with a patience she did not feel. It rang twice. A man answered. 1 word. A name she didn't recognize. She said what Nana had told her to say. Exactly. 3 sentences. Silence on the line. Then, confirmed. 40 minutes. The line went dead. Zuri set the receiver down and looked at Nana. 40 minutes. Nana nodded. We need to keep Alexei safe for 40 minutes. They looked at each other in the flickering concrete room. How do we get to the top floor, Zuri said, without using any of the 3 stairwells? Nana almost smiled. There is a 4th way. I told you I have been here 8 years. The 4th way was a maintenance shaft, not an elevator, not a staircase, but a vertical access passage built into the east wall of the building for pipe and cable maintenance. Wide enough for 1 person. Iron rungs bolted into the concrete every 18 inches. It ran from the basement all the way to the top floor. Zuri looked up into it with the small torch Nana had produced from her apron pocket. You've used this, Zuri said. Once, Nana said. 8 years ago. Different problem. Zuri looked at her. You stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Alexei. Nana grabbed her arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. You are a cleaning girl. I know, Zuri said. These are dangerous men. I know that too. Nana held her arm for a moment longer. Then she let go. Top floor. East wall panel. It opens into the linen cupboard beside his study. You'll hear if you need to hear. Zuri put the torch between her teeth and started climbing. The shaft was cold and narrow, and the iron rungs were rough under her palms. She counted floors by the cable junctions 1, 2, 3, moving as fast and as quietly as she could, which required a concentration that pushed everything else out of her head. No room for fear in a maintenance shaft. Only the next rung. She reached the top floor junction and found the panel by feel, a flat metal square with a release catch on the left side. She pressed it slowly, controlling the swing, and eased it open 2 inches. Darkness. The smell of clean linen. She pushed through into the cupboard, closed the panel behind her, and pressed her ear to the cupboard door. Voices. Outside. Close. She recognized Alexei's voice immediately, controlled, but with something underneath it now that she had never heard before. Tension held very tight. Another voice. Someone she didn't recognize. Speaking quietly and quickly in Russian. And then a third voice, one she did recognize. One of the senior staff. A man she had seen at Alexei's table, at his meetings. A man who had been in this house for years. One of the 3 inside men. He was already up here. Zuri's hand found the cupboard door handle. She pressed her palm flat against it and thought very fast. She had no weapon. She had a torch, a brass key, and the information that help was coming in. She checked her internal count, approximately 32 minutes. 32 minutes was a long time. She heard Alexei say something sharp and short in Russian. The other voices responded simultaneously, overlapping, rising. Something fell. Something heavy. Then silence. Then Alexei's voice again. Slower now. Careful. The voice of a man choosing every single word. Zuri made the decision. She opened the cupboard door and walked out. The study was lit by a single lamp on the desk. 3 men stood in the center of the room. Alexei and his 2 personal guards facing the senior staff member and 2 others she didn't recognize. Large men. Dmitri's outside contacts. They were already inside the building. 7 faces turned toward her. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then the senior staff member, the inside man, said something in Russian and reached inside his jacket. Stop. Alexei's voice. Absolute. Flat. The man stopped. Not because of Zuri. Because of the way Alexei said it. Alexei looked at Zuri with those pale blue eyes. Something moved in them. Not surprise. Recognition. Like he had calculated many possibilities tonight, and she was one of them. You called, he said. Not a question. 40 minutes from about 8 minutes ago, she said. 32 minutes now. Maybe 30. He absorbed this in 1 second. Turned back to the 3 men facing him. When he spoke in Russian, his voice had changed completely, all the controlled tension gone, replaced by something so cold and steady it changed the temperature of the room. Whatever he said made the inside man's hand come very slowly back out of his jacket. Empty. The next 29 minutes were the longest of Zuri's life. Alexei's 2 personal guards kept their positions. The 3 opposing men stood where they were. Nobody moving, nobody speaking, the air in the study thick with the particular tension of a situation waiting for its resolution. Alexei sat behind his desk. He did not appear to be afraid. He appeared to be waiting, the same way he finished reading before he acknowledged you. Everything in its proper order. Zuri stood beside the linen cupboard door and kept her eyes on the inside man's hands and did not let herself think about anything except the next minute. At minute 27 she heard it, the distant sound of vehicles on the gravel drive below. Multiple engines. Moving fast and then stopping hard. The inside man heard it too. His face changed. Alexei looked at Zuri. 32 minutes, she said quietly. I told you. The corner of his mouth moved. The smallest possible acknowledgement of the smallest possible almost smile. Then the doors opened, and the room filled with people who answered only to him, and it was over. They arrested the inside men. They found Dimitri's remaining guards and removed them from the building one by one. Somewhere across the city, calls were being made. Zuri didn't know the details and didn't ask for them. She sat in the kitchen at the long wooden table, the same place she had found Nana 2 hours ago, and drank tea that someone had put in front of her and stared at the grain of the wood and let her hands shake now that it was finally safe to let them. Nana sat across from her. Neither of them spoke for a while. "You climbed the maintenance shaft," Nana said eventually. "You knew I would." "I hoped," Nana said. "There is a difference." Zuri looked at her. "You've been watching this building for a long time." 8 years, Nana said simply. "I watch. I wait. I learned who to trust." She looked at Zuri steadily. "I was right about you." The kitchen door opened. Alexei walked in, without guards, without assistants, alone for the first time Zuri had ever seen him. He looked at the 2 women at the table and pulled out a chair and sat down. He looked tired. Not broken, this man didn't break. But the weight of the night was visible on him in a way that his public face never allowed. "You could have stayed in the basement," he said to Zuri.
"Help was coming," she said.
"But you needed 32 minutes. And you thought you could provide that." "I didn't think about it that carefully," she admitted. He looked at her for a long moment. "Dimitri was with me for 11 years, he said quietly. It wasn't an explanation.
It was something he needed to say out loud to someone.
"I know," Zuri said. 11 years. He looked at his hands on the table. "And a cleaning girl who has been in my house for 6 weeks saw what I didn't see." "I had nothing else to do but watch," Zuri said. "You had an empire to run." Something shifted in his expression. Not the measuring look. Something more honest than that. "What do you want?" he said. "Not tonight. In general. What did you come to Moscow for?" Zuri thought about her brother's school fees, her mother's medical bills, the small flat across the city, with 2 women who didn't know where she worked. "To build something," she said. "I came to build something." Alexei nodded slowly, like he was filing it correctly. "Then we will talk," he said. "When this night is finished, we will talk about what you came here to build." He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked back toward the door. At the threshold, he paused without turning. "Zuri." "Yes. You did well tonight." Then he was gone. Nana poured more tea into both their cups. Outside the kitchen window, the first gray light of early morning was beginning to show at the edge of the Moscow sky. The city waking up. Ordinary and enormous and completely unaware of what had happened inside these walls. Zuri wrapped both hands around her cup and felt the warmth of it and breathed. She had come to Moscow to build something. She was beginning to think she already had. Thank you so much for staying with this story through. If this meant something to you, subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Share it with someone who needs a story about a quiet person who sees everything. We will see you in the next one. Black Heart Sparkles.